I'm mostly here through my creative research that I did with my company, which sort of happened in a circuitous fashion. I was getting ready for our 10th anniversary season of the company, and a lot of companies often do retrospectives, or to commemorate your anniversary. And I haven't really done a lot of visiting of old work, but I thought, well, maybe it would be interesting to take favorite moments and images and movements and recontextualize that into a new evening-length work for our anniversary concert, and at the same time kind of address this idea of sampling and appropriating. So it started there, and I wrote a fellowship to a place called the Maggie Alasey National Center for Choreography, and we received a fellowship. It's at Florida State University, and they have state-of-the-art facilities, and it's really about the development, research and development of new work. And right about that time, we actually arrived there, I think, in the end of 2008, when Beyonce had released the Single Ladies video. And prior to that time, I thought, why would I stop with my own work? If I'm going to look at sampling and appropriating in the context of dance, it's far more interesting to really unpack that question and think about it in terms of sampling other people's work and what are the complications of that. And so it was really, serendipitous timing that Beyonce had done the Single Ladies video, because in that video, and I don't know if you all know this, but she directly appropriated, actually pretty much stole Bob Fosse's choreography from Mexican Breakfast. So all of these moves that you see her doing, this is from like this piece called Walk It Out, I think. It's from the Mexican Breakfast, another one. But she, in the beginning, it wasn't really clear, and so she was kind of, from the dance community, being asked about this. And then she did some interviews where she said, yeah, I was watching these old videos online, and I saw this, and I really loved the look of it, and so I talked to my choreographer. So she acknowledged that this was her inspiration, but it just brings up all these questions about, well, who is getting credit for this? Is it now being associated? I mean, it's a very iconic dance now in pop culture, and it is a very iconic dance associated with Beyonce, not with Bob Fosse, because Bob Fosse's range and his, people who know about him, it's not going to be as wide. So, so that was really interesting. So when we went down to Florida State University, I actually, in my work prior to that, the piece that I made before this work, which we called Punk Yankees, was called Cinderbox 18, and that work was a lot for me about reality culture and authenticity and ideas about authenticity in dance, what is real. And so a lot of that research also really led into this very nicely, because I was kind of thinking of those ideas already. But when we got to Mancy, I went and had focus groups with choreographers and dancers and lawyers and people from all over Florida State University, and they're, both in the dance community and the broader field at large, and the film and video, and just to kind of start to understand the relationship between dance and intellectual property. And I discovered a copyright primer, which is up here now, and the thing that, and this was put out by something called the Dance Heritage Coalition. They're out of Washington, D.C. And they mostly look at intellectual property with respect to heritage and preservation, but they're also kind of starting to look at the idea. I mean, they aren't really approaching it from sampling and this whole thing that's happening. But they do have a primer so that choreographers and dance makers and people in the field can really understand, what is copyrightable, what is fair use, and some of these ideas, and with the dance field. So I'll just read to you some of my research questions that initially framed the work that we did with this fellowship. What defines fair use in dance? Can movements or a movement phrase be copyrighted, or just a full dance? Is it permissible to borrow physical imagery, choreographic devices, or visual design if the movement is reinvented? What defines the choreography as something that is copyrightable? Is it the movement, the organization of bodies in space, the stage design, the concept, the direction, or all of that together? Is it the live performance copyrightable or just the video documentation because live work isn't fixed in a tangible medium? How does ownership fit into the common practice of choreographers working with their dancers to generate movement material? Do the dancers have any ownership in the movement they create in someone else's work? As dance is passed from body to body, how does dance education and personal lineage fit into our ideas about authenticity? What if the dancers don't have the particular training necessary to execute movement in a way that it was originally intended? Is there something interesting about that failure, or does it only serve to compromise the original work? What about the translation of a particular form? Are the rules in contemporary dance different than in ballet, where movement is more codified? How does embodiment complicate sampling in terms of race, class, gender, and age? Should power in the history of cultural appropriation be acknowledged? Similarly, how is the discussion of intellectual property in music, where digital recording creates an exact replica of the original, different from dance, where everything is mediated by individual bodies? What about derivative works? What does it mean when somebody stylistically references a choreographer like Cunningham or Fosse? Is that appropriation or is it homage? Should it be acknowledged or is it what naturally occurs through dance education? Is it even relevant in an age where fusions, mashups, and cross-disciplinary works are the norm? Are there still any pure movement styles? Does the widespread appropriation that happens on the web serve to honor and help promote the original author, or does it compromise the author's intention or credibility? Should we be cautious about putting our work on the web for fear of theft, or should we embrace it as a mechanism to market ourselves and be part of a larger conversation, for better or for worse? How can you quantify transformation in a live form, which is what makes sampling legally permissible? Can you cover a dance, like cover bands and music? Is impersonation a kind of identity theft? So this, when we went there with all of these questions, we kind of got in the studio and delved deeply into ideas of sampling and mashups, stylistic referencing, impersonation, cultural appropriation, and ideas about fair use. And it was just like the most fascinating experience. First of all, we learned a lot off of YouTube, which is incredibly awful and frustrating because it's on a small screen and you have to reverse it and, you know, to like learn movement. But so I was really interested in all these problems. And the thing that's in this copyright primer for the dance community, I wasn't really concerned about like the legalities of what I was doing, because fair use is often described as being a particular time duration, and it says here, and I talked to some lawyers about it as well, transformation is a key word. So if you're taking something and contextualizing it, I think it's on page 6 here. Hold on one second. Where am I? 5. Oh, okay. So such works, so things are automatically protected by copyright the moment they are fixed in a tangible form of expression, even if they are not registered with the U.S. Copyright Office. Well, as I mentioned, so much live performance is not fixed in a tangible medium until you record it. So then you get to fair use, and it talks about that criticism, teaching, scholarship, or research is often considered fair use. And the piece Punk Yankees that we made was completely contextualized. It was, when we were doing the sampling, it was often, we often used meta theatrical devices so that the audience was very aware of what we were doing. For instance, I'm going to show you the opening sequence of this work. And early on, I had this idea that I would start the show with a post-show discussion. And so the idea being that the audience wasn't asking questions, but we were taking questions from the audience and giving them time as if they were asking questions, and then responding to those questions to kind of help frame or give a lens to the rest of the concert. And so it was a fun way of opening the concert. They were a little confused at first, but then it became funny, and then we immediately took that into a very recognizable sample in the dance community. Not everybody would know, and this is another thing in dance, is that what is really pop culture references in dance are the ones that a broad community will know, It's different when you're in a, you know, more kind of marginal field. You know, if it's not commercial or hugely out on the net, like the Beyonce video, who's going to know? But it's really important to be able to contextualize it and credit what you're doing. So we went from this post-show discussion into a sample by an Israeli choreographer by the name of Ohad Nahran. And he has a company called Batsheva, and they perform internationally. And he also sets his work on big companies like Hubbard Street here in Chicago, and other companies all over the world. And so this piece is pretty iconic into the dance field. And the dancers do these sequence of movements, and then they stand up and they sing something in Hebrew. Well, we changed those words, and this is what we came up with. One last one. Over there. Yeah. No, I don't think so. I mean, there were things about the process that were really generative in terms of building movement and were awesome and surprised us all, but I don't really see myself becoming like a dance sampling artist, if there is such a thing. I mean, I have a whole new respect for the whole genre of sampling, and it's really kind of challenging.
I mean, it's different with dance because you're not sampling, in music you sample an exact piece of music, and in dance, we were learning from YouTube most of the time.
Yeah.
So
music is more so the cut and paste.
really
and then you have 8 dancers in front of the screens that spin.
Dance is mediated by bodies, and so it's like tricky. I mean, you would be in the rehearsal process looking at this tiny plot and having arguments like, what's happening here? You know, is there like what's in and have like voice. We decided not to use the music, but we just hum it.
We learned this off of YouTube. I hope we're doing it right. We can only guess what the movement represents.
We actually had a former Hubbard dancer in the cast, so we got a little bit of an inside scoop on the movement.
The dancers on the video have health insurance.
I have health insurance.
I don't. Still.
You should get health insurance.
I know.
Yeah.
But isn't the point that it's a benefit for dancing?
Yes.
Right.
That is the point.
Yeah, I get mine from the internet.
Yeah. I actually wanted to say that's important to me, and we're going to get there. Company's growing little bit by bit, and we'll have health insurance. This is a really common problem in the dance field.
Of course, if we have health insurance, then we have
budgets are so slow.
physical therapy, and
This next piece is an appropriation of Pina Bausch's famous dance from Cafe Mueller that was in the film Talk to Her. If any of you have seen that, about the woman that's in a coma. And so the beginning of that piece, they're moving, she has chairs in a cafe, and all the people are moving the chairs out of her way. And this is the music from that original piece. The movement that I'm doing is different a little bit, but that was just like speaking to the idea of taking the image that is recognizable to people from that film or from Pina Bausch's work. She's a very famous German choreographer who died about a year and a half ago. So that's that. And then I think what I will do is show you then more menu. The full excerpts from the full concert. This, a lot of the work that we sampled was from Lucky Plush's history, as I mentioned. And you saw our logo in the background. That was the just the anniversary season logo, which was an appropriation of the Lucky Strike logo. So this video footage is the quality, I'm sorry, is a little bit bad on the large screen here. I'm not sure why that is, but anyway, so a lot of it was our own work, coming from our own work. But you see that logo with a 10 and the Lucky Strike image. And we branded ourselves all over our costumes with Lucky Plush. So it's kind of like the idea of branding and how that, you know, like that we're saying that we own something. So that was part of the concept as well.
Push your thigh open with your hand to make space for your pelvis. Attitude around to the front. Circle head tight to reach.
I hate to say it, but this would probably look better on YouTube. So this section we brought out computer monitors, and we had a Brady Bunch style where we talked to each other.
What is going on over there?
Supposed to be through
Honestly,
live
I
webcams,
don't really know.
but the dance center didn't have
Are
the
you okay?
capacity to do 8 monitors at once through the mixes. So we ended up pre-recording. Then we learned this Kate Bush video from YouTube.
Is it a video?
Yeah.
It's a fabulous video. If you're not familiar with Kate Bush, she did a lot of early videos that are really freaky and amazing. And looks like she's in a constant state of alarm.
Is this move copyrighted? I just got it. Oh, no, this is legal.
It's okay if you're not making any money.
I don't remember this. Where are we?
This doesn't feel like the beginning.
Okay, let's just stop. Let's stop that. This is Excite Performance Group, 1998, the moment Bacchus came. We were walking in a grid pattern and holding teacups. We weren't actually singing, it was in the sound.
And this was from a section called Memory Mash, where we remembered movement samples from pieces we've done of other choreographers' work, and then we mashed it up so it was like arms of one thing, legs from another, so that it became completely different, unrecognizable. But that would be more sort of akin to what maybe a music sampling artist would do, is taking, layering, cutting up. And again, with dance, there's less sort of, it's more insider, because who knows these original samples anyway? And it's from our memory, so we're already failing to start with. There's already a level of failure in the fact that our memories are fallible. Hi, I'm Julia Rhoads, and as I mentioned before, this is a memory sample from Brian Jeffrey. This is the idea of lineage.
I watched Julia perform those 2 memory samples of Brian Jeffrey and Excite Performance Group, and I re-choreographed them in the style of me, Kim Goldman.
So she took my,
I watched Kim's re-choreography of my memory samples of Brian Jeffrey and Excite Performance Group, and then I created a phrase.
Hi, my name is David Gerber.
This is the impersonation section.
Yeah, I'm not from Russia, and but I always wanted my first name to be Bradley, which is actually my second middle name. But if my first name was Bradley, then one of my middle names might have been Michael, after my aunt's ex-husband. But yeah, in which case my nickname might have been Misha, which is Russian. So.
We did a dance competition called So You Think You Can Choreograph, and it was on our website, which I'll show you in a minute, stealthisdance.com, and the winner, we put her moves in our piece. And that was
It's
from.
not that I
It's
want
not
credit.
that I want credit.
I mean, I do.
I mean, I do.
They're my ideas.
They're my ideas.
I want to get
I
a
want
cut
to
of
get
any
a cut
money
of
involved.
any money involved.
But who are
But
you?
who are you
to make money,
to make
off,
money
of me?
off of me?
Anyway.
Anyway.
Where did you learn to dance?
I've always danced. I don't really have any formal training. I mean, this can't really be taught anyway.
This is an impersonation of Denis Lavant, a French actor, from the final credits of a movie film, Beau Travail. We just loved it. So this is from samples from my previous work, and we did every bolero mashup we could think of in the music. So this is also from, this is Bolero. It's a version of Bolero that's in a different time signature. This is where we were drinking wine. No, it was part of this idea of toasting everybody who we borrowed, stole, appropriated. And so we were making these rickety structures and pouring wine. This is from the Beyonce mashup.
Get ready to walk 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. The left, right, left. Now 4 steps with your left foot. 1, 2.
So this is the ending credits where Denis Lavant is actually on the screen. It's amazing if you ever see that film. You can't possibly sample him because he's crazy. Like, we actually tried to learn that movement and it was impossible. So, anyway. So yeah, you can turn on the lights. So the thing that we did, and maybe in a moment we can turn them back off, but so that's some of that work. I don't know if anybody has any kind of questions about just seeing those. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about copyright.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have anything to do about whether it's a performance for pay or not?
Well, it probably, if we were to become hugely successful commercially, oftentimes what I'm learning is it's people, if they feel like they could be getting a cut of money, which was that section where she was saying, I want a cut of any money involved. You know, most people don't, I mean, we're actually, Lucky Plush Productions here in Chicago is large in terms of the small and mid companies. You have Hubbard Street, Joffrey, and then you have like the rest of us, and we're kind of like on the, our budget size is on the top of that. But most choreographers, like you think of all of the high school dance and college dance, and until you can afford, we worked with a sampling artist to do a lot of those mashups. And I often commission musicians to work with me, but most people set dances to work that are to songs that are just out on the radio, and they don't even think about it. I do have some people in the field, some contemporaries, who have gotten calls and said, you know, you're using this piece of music, I found it on the web, and they're like this tiny company that is at 60,000 annual operating, you know, budget. And they're like, oh my God, we've made this whole dance and now we have to pay for this. And so it is very important to understand that. And having gone through this research for myself, I wouldn't, I will always continue to work with musicians who create original work because I just don't even want to deal with that. In terms of the movement samples, they are so recontextualized that if anybody were to come after us, the longest sample that we did was that opening O Had Nahrin, but it was so much like the changing of the words and how we did it, we would have such a strong case for transformation and fair use. I just can't see it happening. Plus, these samples have been on the web, and we got a lot of attention in Dance Magazine nationally. And there's a very famous international choreographer by the name of William Forsythe, who I guess you guys saw. Some of you saw Synchronous Objects, a website that he did where you can kind of look at choreography from different lenses. But he's really well known, and he came across stealthisdance.com and wrote an amazing blog about it, saying, you know, it represents the economies of culture as we experience them in our practice, and this brilliant new generation of thinkers who are dancing, and it was very nice. So I think mostly people are in support of this being raised, and for people to start thinking about what it is, because I know that me doing things like this and also talking to students, people are starting to think, oh my God, right, like there is ownership involved. And I think that so often dance makers, and even in theater, until you get to a certain level, your boards of directors, all these people aren't necessarily, you know, thinking about it on that level. How do we protect our assets and our company or this other stuff? Oh, sorry, I think you were next.
Yeah. I have a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
One, I have never had any idea how anyone records choreography other than just like through video and film. So my first question is, how, one is that other non-film medium still used? And two, before the advent of film, and you can just watch it, what were these issues, you know, did these issues exist?
Right.
With either, you know, using either fairly or unfairly someone else's work.
Yeah.
And then my next question is, and you sort of alluded to it, but at what point does a choreographer come to own his or her own work? Is it just when they sort of reach this nebulous level of fame that then they can start asserting themselves and saying, boy, I own these moves?
Yeah. Movement cannot necessarily, like words or even a sentence. Like usually you copyright a document or a full piece or a, you know. If you want to copyright your dance, you have to fix it in a tangible medium, so videotape it and then submit it, and you can do that. For older, but I think that you would also have a case if you went and saw a dance, and it's so widely written about now. People are often taken to task on very borrowed material, especially if it's not contextualized and not referenced. So there was a piece in the New York Times recently that talked about a choreographer who was so directly ripping. I mean, I don't know that they used it as theft, but it was like such a derivative of O Had Nahrin's choreography, because she worked in Hubbard Street and she sets a lot of work. She's also ripped off my own choreography, so I know this person. And it happens. Like, it happens in the field where I shared a concert with this particular person, and I had a piece a long time ago called Surrealism, and it had balloons that were all over the stage, inflated, that were rigged to fishing line, and then we had this whole inflatable environment. And then she went to somewhere else in the States and was choreographing for a major ballet company and made a piece that had balloons all over the stage. So, I mean, it's like, I didn't own that image. In fact, Andy Warhol did a piece that had the pillows that, I mean, it's not like helium balloons is anything new. I mean, that's the thing. Everything's being done, but I think it's about naming your influences, contextualizing, and just knowing like when it's really crappy, like what you're doing. You know, it's like some people just do it because they convince themselves that it's their material.
If she had called you and just said, hey, I really love the balloon thing, and
yeah, that didn't happen. And she also used a piece of music from that work that was a pre-existing piece of music in the next piece that she set for Hubbard Street. Probably, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, that this is such a touchy subject, and I think there's a lot of preciousness around ownership in dance because there's not a lot of scholarship. Whereas in other fields, in music, I mean, people have been talking forever about, you know, jazz musicians taking licks from each other, and, you know, and how that actually pushes the form forward. But in choreography, because there's so little compensation in so many ways for concert dance. I mean, you just have this tiny sliver of pop culture where people would know Thriller, or they would know the Macarena and the electric slide because they do them at weddings, or you know, this kind of thing, right? So it's very different. The stakes are different, and so I think a lot of us who are choreographers, people I've spoken with, maybe have a little bit more sensitivity to ownership. So that operates. Yes.
This sort of goes off that, and I don't know if you were planning to get to it later, so I don't want to preempt it, but you said one of the questions that you raised at your fellowship at Florida State was does YouTube help dance? Does it help companies, or does it hurt them? And I think that sort of ties into, like you said, it's such a small share of compensation. The reason I ask is because recently we were just trying to show a friend the Ohad piece -16 at a Seder because of the Hebrew, and there aren't, Hubbard Street has some excerpts.
Yeah,
of it. There's no full thing, and there was, you know, something like a school did the piece.
Did you come across ours?
I didn't.
You'd have been like, what?
But we couldn't find it. But, you know, but in that instance, you know, does that help dance by exposing people to something that is so powerful and interesting?
I think
or does
so.
It hurt companies because they aren't, maybe then that person doesn't come to the concert.
I think it's like what Forsyth said in the blog he wrote about Steal This Dance. It's about economies of scale and how we experience that within our practice. And I feel like as long as it's tagged and credited appropriately, it helps. And I would be kind of like honored if somebody stole or, you know, ripped my work. And as long as they clearly, for me, it was important for me to talk about how I fail, right? Like, because I think there's something interesting in the failure. If I were to sample a tap dance, I can't tap to save my life. So it would, and you know, I was a classical ballerina, and now I have loads of contemporary training. I can actually pull off a lot of things, but I also can't pull off things, and I don't pretend to say that I understand like Bharatanatyam, what the whole religious and cultural contexts are that, you know, make that something that is outside of my frame of reference. So I just feel like it really is about acknowledgement, and I think that the web is a great resource and tool, but unfortunately a lot of people just think that anything that's on the web is just fine to learn from. And in fact, Fergie had an HP commercial about 2 years ago where she's like, I love finding new dance moves online, and it's like, oh, okay, you know, do they belong to anybody? Or like, you know, it's like this kind of thing that just people don't necessarily think about it. Go ahead.
On the line of credit, I wonder about actual dancers generating material, which happens quite often.
Yep.
I mean, I've been in pieces where like 70% of the choreography is dancer generated.
Right.
There's no credit in the program. It's, you know, the choreographer
right.
is attributed to that. And how does the dancer own their own?
No. So once no, it doesn't. And I'm very sensitive to that because I worked in a company where, and the way that my company works is we generate as an ensemble. It's important to realize that a lot of people think choreography means moves, and it does not. That is part of choreography. Movement, how you organize them in space, how you direct it, what the intention is, what are how is the space, like how do you use interface music and lighting and design elements with that. Those are all part of choreography. Movement is an important part of choreography, definitely. And so I feel that an older school way of doing that is choreographers like Shirley Mordine and some people who've been around for a long time don't necessarily say that. More often than not now, like I do in my programs, choreography direction, Julia Rhoads created in collaboration with the ensemble, right? So you want to acknowledge the fact that it is my work, it is my concept, it is my direction, it is how I'm organizing it, what's the arc of the work and all of that, and everything else that goes into having a company. But these people are incredibly important to me, and what they bring to it is incredibly unique. And if I were to swap out a dancer because somebody gets injured, it's going to be a different work, and I recognize that. Long time in the past, choreographers never did acknowledge that, and I think now it's more known and that is the common practice. Very few, as you mentioned, very few choreographers come in and give every single bit of movement. And for me, I have done that before. Like I've made 2 pieces for River North Dance Chicago. I go in and I set it completely, right? Sometimes it has to do with the amount of time that you have and what you have to accomplish. But I'm more interested in the personality and the subjectivity of my performers. Like, I find them way more compelling than what I would give them. Or if I give them something, often I bring in movement phrases and then I'll have them manipulate them, right? So that it becomes more about their authentic voice, translating that, and then I play with how that operates with the other dancers and choreographically how that, you know, cause and effect and how things move in space. So ultimately it's my work, but they are part of that work. They don't own it. Really, when you're a dancer generating movement within it, that was one of my questions for research, and it's pretty common. So really, when you're a dancer, you're sort of giving, you know, if you have a contract and beginning of year to work with somebody or the company, it's really there. But none of the most companies aren't even copywriting dances. So this is why it's all so blurry. You know, go ahead.
Shouldn't all original choreography be filmed for other reasons than copyright? I remember a few years ago that we were doing like a, especially if you die, and then they were trying to recreate, I think it was Jerome Robin's piece or something, and they was the same troupe that he had worked with was trying to study whatever film they could find of his original choreography,
you asked about
so
this.
they could you know, redo it for this 50th anniversary celebration.
And it's really hard. So you have people that you pass, like choreographers. Video, obviously, since the advent of video, it's a much different game. You can get so much more information from that. It would behoove choreographers to actually write about the work and talk about what is important to them within it. For me, authenticity of presence is a really big deal. But you asked also about before video what happened. There's something called Laban notation. And Laban is a very old notation device for recording choreography. It's limited because it's a three-dimensional, you know, you can talk about where the arm might be in space or something, but to actually know how to sequence and what the quality is, it's limited. So, but for the old Graham dances and, you know, that people do have, there are people that just write Laban notation for dance.
So this, are you talking like the physical little wooden dolls?
No, it's a written, it's like a language. Yeah, it's a written language, and it gives you the cues of what the body is doing at any given time. Yes?
It's an interesting dilemma because, and this is, I think, going to sound horribly stereotypically University of Chicago, but you know, I think one of the most difficult parts of being an artist is that you're trying to, in a way, create a brand name for yourself. And so those people who are successful are those people like Bob Fosse, and that you know what they stand for, you know what their brand is. So in that respect, like, you can almost say that the market will almost take care of itself, and that those people who are incredibly successful at creating a brand name for themselves will stand out no matter what. So in that respect, I don't think that copyright is so necessary, but I do see now this added layer of difficulty with the internet coming along, and I think you just have to ask sort of, you know, is not giving acknowledgement to somebody like Bob Fosse and that these were his moves helping him or hurting him. Because there are some people who might look at Beyonce's video and say, hey, that's Bob Fosse, and think of Bob Fosse as now a stronger brand name. Those that don't know him look at that video and be like, wow, Beyonce did some really cool moves in that, you know? So I think that's the difficulty. It's like
absolutely
having the knowledge and not having the knowledge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is true, you know, the idea that a company, so for instance, sort of like if I were to talk about the branding of my company, I make original dance theater that's conceptually based, that has humor, so that this piece would be very similar to other pieces that I do, just that this one happened to be about something that recontextualized other things to talk about that thing. So people know Lucky Plush for that kind of work, and we're touring a lot more nationally and represented by someone in New York City. And because my national profile is now much broader because of this work that I've been doing and the fellowships that I've been getting, people have referenced me in talking about intellectual property in dance that, you know, had I not done this project, and they might not have gone to my YouTube channel and seen other works and kind of been on the radar for that. So I agree with you that that is sort of how it happens. There's kind of a vetting process through achievement and through recognition and through press and all of that. But it's still really challenging because there's a lot of great dance artists out there, dance makers, who aren't maybe getting the nibbles or getting the attention, and they're making, and people could see it online and, you know, directly do that. So it is, I mean, it is a sensitive thing. It is really, yeah. So I agree with you on all those points. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. Yeah. But I just feel like you have to acknowledge. I mean, if you don't sort of say what it is that you're doing, then you're just setting yourself up for, you know, all kinds of trouble. Was it Picasso that said what was that quote of like, good artists or average artists copy, great artists steal? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. What is that? I think the idea meaning that if you're just constantly like, you know, sort of just copying all the time, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you're actually taking, learning, and reinventing and pushing the envelope forward, and that's the idea in a lot of the literature and a lot of the scholarship that's being written about all of this. Matt Mason, I was mentioning to you, he wrote The Pirate's Dilemma, and he falls in the line of that. Sampling and all of that fair use is very good. It's a very good thing because it pushes markets forward. Like if you go back to Edison making the phonograph, musicians would have been like, you are going to take my music and put it on a plastic disc and sell it, and we don't have to be there. But right, it's like all these things that, you know, and so he, Punk Yankees actually was my sort of appropriation from his book, because he talked about that being kind of like a punk capitalism. So that it's like stuff outside the market. And Yankees, he said, is a Dutch slang word. Janka comes from Janka, which means pirate. So that was where that title came from. So, you know, people have all different, I just feel like, again, it's really about being clear about what it is that you're doing and contextualizing what you're doing. That's what it is for me, because I would, I mean, it's just not in, I don't believe in stealing just to, you know, I just think that's weird. But let me take you to stealthisdance.com, which, if you want to, could we just lower the lights a little bit? So this was the 10th anniversary website that we made as a kind of like a virtual stage for this project. And to get people involved in the discussion, the dialogue, to start a conversation about all these things. Again, you see the 10th anniversary logo that was appropriated from Lucky Strike, and I'm sure you all know the Steal This Dance being an Abby Hoffman reference to Steal This Book. So here we go. So you go along here, and we had a blog about Steal This Dance and Punk Yankees. I don't do a lot. I mean, this is really because it's a project website. There's not a lot of activity from me. I'm not maintaining the site because I already have 5 million jobs. So, but it's been, I get emails from people who are in university settings who are using it in courses and as a point of discussion. But so video sampling, memory sampling, fusions, lineages and derivatives, impersonations, and illegal art research, that's here, sorry, is where I've listed a bunch of links to information that you can read. So here is the composite version of Beyonce, the piece that we did, so because it's kind of a fun dance. This is before it was changed. It's pretty simple. We did this at Florida State University when we were first doing the research.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All the single ladies, 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 all the single ladies.
So this is the Macarena arms with the electric slide legs. Now with the hand drive.
And your right foot out. Step 2. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it.
alegría Macarena, que tu cuerpo es para dar la alegría y cosas buenas. Baila tu cuerpo, alegría Macarena.
This is Alvin Ailey's Revelations. Some ballet. Which you can always say, some ballet. Well, except this is from
Bring it back.
This is Fosse from Mexican Breakfast that Beyonce stole from.
Same thing again.
This is Mexican Breakfast again, and this is Thriller coming up. That's in the prison. You guys ever seen that prison video? Where everybody's doing Thriller? It's amazing. It's like all the prisoners are doing Thriller. It's amazing. Minuet.
Get ready to walk. 4 steps.
Ballet tunnel. If there is such a thing.
2.
There seems to be in every ballet.
4. The left. Right.
You saw this in the others. Brady Bunch. Keep on, dancing on through the night. Girl in the cake or the flower.
Okay, let's see how my rad friends dance.
This is from Contact Improvisation and like body surfing, but we did it as a Esther Williams, Martha Graham. This is Paul Taylor, Esplanade. This is Grease. You can't really see what we did, but okay. This is a chorus line in Madonna match. Beyonce to end. And Revelations, yes. So, yeah, that's what it is. We just thought all music. So, yeah, we wanted to see how many iconic moments in dance we could fit into one dance, and Beyonce seemed the appropriate frame for that. So that was made by a sampling artist who works with illegal art recording, which is Girl Talk's label. But this guy, his name is Stephen Robinson, and he has a band called Yay Big. So I'll show you a couple of the fusion forms because they're really great. If you don't know, do you guys know Merce Cunningham? Yeah. Okay, so he's a choreographer that worked with John Cage and goes way back. He just actually died at 90-something last year. And his movement, it's almost always in unitards. It's very influenced by ballet and line, but it's really, we always call it ballet on crack. It's like just crazy hard balancing. And so we mixed it with Appalachian clogging because we thought that would be. Oh, have you seen it?
No, I'm just saying.
Oh, you have to.
But just the concept is.
Yeah, cheer toe. Okay, so this is the clogging ham. We did it outside an Irish bar and inside it.
This is not a situation where I make a dance to
That's
which
John
they
Cage's,
design
sorry,
and
Cunningham's voice talking.
make a piece of music. It's like separate things which come together.
Don't you love his headband? That's it. Anyways, the next one is really my favorite, which is, is cheer toe. This guy is crazy, Adam Rose. I love him. Okay, so Butoh is a Japanese form that comes out of kind of post-World War II Germany, kind of German expressionism, and it has, if you've never seen Butoh, it's movement that is really slow, like it moves, and they're often naked and covered in white. And it's beautiful and grotesque at the same time. It's really, Aiko and Koma are two very famous Buto artists who live here in the States. And so we decided that cheerleading was the appropriate mashup with it. I'll do full screen there, because you have to have the full effect. And Britney Spears, of course. Oh God, he kills me. Okay, that's probably enough of that. Okay, let me go to that. And then one other thing, which is a sampling from video sampling, is Ballet Boys. You're going to need to see that. Because we thought, you know, we really should sample just the boy part from ballet and see what that looks like. In a pas de deux. We didn't do a very good job, though, because both of us actually look like the ballerina doing it. He has a little fall coming up soon. But you don't notice it because you never watch the boy in the pas de deux. Oh, we decided to give them focus. Anyways, so you get the point. But so how do I go? I'm the wrong one. So that's Steal This Dance. It's fun to just sort of, the fun thing was the terms and conditions. Where, you know, each move for sale is in our moves boutique. We sold dance moves online thinking maybe we could actually make some money. Like it would be some genius fundraising campaign or just a place for dialogue. And so we, you know, most of them were just like, you know, $9.99 or $19.99. The only move that we sold was from the sale bin, which were moves that were like the video was off, or it was just like we were messing up and starting over. And the executive director of Hubbard Street bought this move. It just goes like this. That was what he bought. And he bought it for $20, I think. So, but you know, like the return policy, all sales are final. If the moves don't fit your purposes, they cannot be returned, but may be exchanged for moves of equal or lesser value. Be sure to check the sale bin. You know, and so what we did too is I got choreographers nationally all over to donate moves for our moves boutique. So that was kind of fun. So maybe we should just, since there's like 12 minutes left, if you have other questions about the site or about more copyright kind of questions, we can just do that.
what did you ultimately learn from this experience in terms of, did you, sounds like you sort of maybe pushed the community a bit to think about these issues. Do you have any, I mean, this is a policy school, do you have any like policy recommendations or?
Oh, wow.
In terms of how, what types of things and what types of laws or policies would sort of help to continue to bring innovation to dance?
I would say that the best thing probably would be to have a more, I mean, so much of what's difficult for dance artists like myself is time in the day and, you know, budgets and, you know, all of that. And for me to copyright one of my dances, it's like a huge process and costs money. And so I would never do it because I don't have the time or the money to do it. So if there was some kind of maybe just way for dancers to just say, oh, I just finished this huge project and I'd like to get, you know, get it copyrighted or whatever, just for my own purposes, that there might be some kind of easier process to do that. You know, but then also recognizing that it's part of the culture. Like, the other thing that wasn't mentioned is, like, so often things are being thought about in the community at large or worldwide. It's just in the ether. You know, it's like I'll have an idea for a dance, and recently I met a couple from Los Angeles, and they also do dance theater work, and they did a piece where it was kind of about ownership, and they were going to call this dance Steal This Dance. And they went online and saw my website, and they were like, oh, you know. So, you know, it's like people are thinking about these things all over the place, and that's just what happens, you know. It's kind of like nothing's new. It's really about how you present it, how you package it, how you brand it, what your take on stuff is, what your voice is, and ideally, as you mentioned, you start kind of gaining momentum with that, and then people start knowing you for kind of the work that you're making, and it becomes part of a broader discourse, at least in the dance field. Yeah.
So earlier on you were talking about this experience where you kind of, it was a bit painful that someone stole your idea, or that's how you felt. And I wonder, can you try to think more about what's the limit, you know, what's a fair use and what's not. So for example, in my own experience, as a very amateur, very low choreographer, I've been borrowing from people who were much higher up for like performances that were free, and I felt, you know, I'm borrowing some moves, that's fair use because, you know, who am I? It doesn't matter. Right. But I don't think they'd be upset, probably, but who knows?
Right.
So that's kind of the question of, you know, how do you do it? Also, another thing I want to mention is it's so tough, even if you wanted to give credit, how do you do that? I'm also a researcher, and so in my research that I write, I can easily cite someone, I can say I'm using the technique of so-and-so here, you know, quote. What? If I'm choreographing, how am I gonna? There's no
program notes.
It's not easy.
Yeah, it's program notes. I mean, our bibliography for Punk Yankees was a tome. It was huge. I mean, it was like it had, and again there was.
Sometimes it's kind of a bit informal. There's not necessarily a long you know, there's not a long program that you can, you know, run everything in.
I think that, you know, where you're at in your career, if it's just to kind of show what you're experimenting with, as long as you're changing and making it yours, it's not a big deal. But once it becomes something more formalized and maybe seen more broadly, just because, for me, I want to.
Your
yeah.
How do you limit between it's okay?
Right.
Does it have to be to do with competition, for example? So if someone who
you
consider to be a competitor stole your idea,
that's
bad. But if it's like a high school troupe, maybe
that's, I know, it's so fascinating. It's really fascinating. I mean, everything I do is pretty original. So, but until I did this project, it wasn't something that I even thought about, because in, you know, my mind, I'm generating new material and ideas or whatever. But I have an interesting story about it, because when we were getting ready to do Punk Yankees, we had a smaller concert at Lynx Hall, shared with some good friends of mine who are out of Berkeley. And they do really interesting media work, and we wanted to kind of do like a pre-concert around these ideas of ownership and things that are mediated by technology. And at some point, we're like, oh, this is a great idea. We've all worked with this, Sheldon B. Smith and Lisa Wymore, and they were from Chicago, and everybody in the cast had some kind of relationship to them. So we thought, let's make, like, it was a 15-minute piece. We're like, let's make a piece where we put everything that we can remember about their work, but also comment on it like you saw in this piece. And it made them really uncomfortable. Like it ended up backfiring, and I think for them it wasn't so much, because it was very contextualized, it wasn't so much like, oh, you're taking what's ours. It was more like they just didn't want the attention. Like they felt like the concert became all about them, and they were coming to Chicago to show they showed a piece of theirs and we showed a different piece of ours. And it was so super uncomfortable, and we felt terribly because we thought that it was going to be this awesome like homage recognition, like we love you and we did this thing and it's fun and funny, and it's not like our relationship's over. It was just this kind of, you know, it brought to me that idea of like, oh wow, like this is so super complicated and sensitive and you know, all of that. So I would say if you're making stuff, to be influenced is one thing, but once you start taking longer chunks of something, find a way to talk about that. Yeah.
So I worked for the Lawyers for the Creative Arts one summer, and I have to say, the whole time we did consultations with creative artists that either had questions about legal issues, such as copyright, that was kind of the main thing, but also people who had run into legal issues because of those things. So not in. And so I sat in on these consultations, and not one of these were ever a dancer or a choreographer. So I'm wondering if you guys actually, so have you heard of any sort of legal conflicts coming up with dancers or choreographers, and did you guys yourselves seek legal, you know, consult for that?
Right. I didn't. Like I said, for me, the only thing that was questionable legality-wise was the use of the Kate Bush song in my mind in the concert, because everything else was a mashup, an appropriation, a transformation, or had commentary, so it would fall under fair use. And I felt really strongly that the work that I was doing would not get, and if it did, that would be a great story, right? But so I wasn't so worried about that, but mostly it's come up in the context of the dance field through heritage. Martha Graham had when she passed away, there was a big lawsuit with the school that bears her name, and the people who were that she passed her choreography down through the estate. And so that was a big lawsuit, and I think it comes up more now in the field for these kinds of rights issues. Who owns the work, especially when you're a company, like somebody might commission the Graham company to set a piece on someone, so who owns that, like all those kinds of questions. It's different in theater because there are often scripts involved. Dance is so tricky, it's so kind of its own animal. So, yeah.
It seems to me that terminology is very important here, and a lot of what I hear people talking about is really archiving. I think as soon as you say copyright, it brings up money, lawyers,
right,
you know, registering and so forth. But archiving is a totally different process. It does the same thing. It saves it for posterity. You can use it for teaching, research, or whatever.
Right.
But it doesn't have the same connotations.
Right. People do that. I mean, everybody's documenting their work now, and you know, I feel putting your work on the web also, in a way, says this is my work, and you know, I think it's a good thing. I mean, ultimately, that kind of sort of sharing on the web.
Last question before Julie has to hit Lakeshore Drive.
So actually, when we reflect putting it on the web, it seems that dating it is very important, because in economics, when I publish something on the web, I want to put a date to say this, I'm the first to have done this.
Right.
So then if someone comes up and does something similar to you, you say, I've done it first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So you know, I'm just wondering if people think of such issues.
Yeah. I think it's becoming now more important than ever with video sharing. It's just everything is right there. So, I mean, you know, YouTube, in a way, has this sort of like socially sanctioned mechanism for appropriation in the response video. It's like, respond, take it, do something with it. You know, it's almost like they're inviting it. And you brought up Batsheva. We did, another one of our, it's on the website, Surrealist Dance, but we thought it'd be fun in rehearsal one day to learn an excerpt file of Batsheva's. So an excerpt video is like you saw from Punk Yankees. It's like a bit of this, a bit of that, and we tried to make it one dance. And then we thought we would like use, so the music we chose was Corona, this old band that does the rhythm of the night, which was the music for that Dennis Levant used at the end of this other thing that we were learning. And it got flagged for intellectual property abuse because of the music, not because of the movement, right? So that was really interesting. I was like, why was my video taken down? You know, and like, are they pissed? Did something happen? You know? And so, yeah.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.